at AmericanProgress.org. A link available through cspan.org. Our guest is Caroline Wadhams, who's a senior policy analyst for that organization, graduate of Tufts University. She is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and previously served on the staff of Senator Russ Feingold, focusing on foreign policy issues. Hiawassee, Georgia is next. Good morning to you.
Good morning, sir. How are you? I had a comment for Caroline, and she answered it as I was on the line, but you know, there is a relationship between President Bush and the people running that country. I mean, they were supposed to be friends. Isn't there some influence he could have there besides supporting the drug trade?
Yes, and we have President Bush and our leaders do have relationships with those people, but you know, I think that we sometimes haven't pushed hard enough on the issues that are so important. I think that this administration has often focused on military solutions, and we haven't prioritized certain crucial aspects of state building, such as you got to get the government strong enough to provide for its people so that it has a certain amount of legitimacy. So, and furthermore, that you've got to get rule of law going. I mean, there's been this lawlessness in Afghanistan, and I think that sometimes this administration has not pushed hard on some of those other priorities. And part of it is, I think, the way that this administration has been focused, but also I think we as a country have not been as effective at doing the state building. We're very good at doing sort of conventional military operations, but less good at figuring out how to build state institutions in other countries and helping develop rule of law and helping develop a police force, etc. So.
Next call is Fairfax, Virginia, Republican line. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, on the opium issue within Afghanistan, I've actually been kind of following that off and on out of curiosity over the past 10, 15 years, actually, because there have been plenty of reports written about it. And most interesting is some of the material that's come out of India by economists and scholars. And they do characterize Pakistan, actually, as a narco-economy, with Afghanistan actually acting as a proxy for producing these opium raw materials. And I think that's worth noting because, you know, these alleged solutions that look at crop replacement and that sort of thing are really kind of misguided. If we have, you know, the ISI and other, you know, black marketeers operating out of Pakistan and, you know, just a huge narco economy operating across both of those countries, it's kind of naive, actually, I think, to look at crop replacement as a realistic solution.
Thanks for the call.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And we have, and it's not just with opium. We've often tried to isolate these problems for Afghanistan, just looking at Afghanistan. You're right about the drug trade. Obviously, Pakistan and Iran also have involvement, and you've got to figure out how to have regional approaches with this. And in terms of you can't just have, you're right, you can't find the magic crop. I mean, you've got to create all the services crops. You've got to create everything that makes selling a crop possible. So you've got to have credit access, you've got to have irrigation, you've got to have roads, the whole infrastructure, which is a huge process and will take a long time. I mean, when I think about Afghanistan and turning this mission around, Lawrence Corbin and I wrote this report, think about a decade. We're not thinking about doing this in the short term, but I think you're right. It's a very complicated, and you've got to have very comprehensive regional solutions.
And in their summary of the Forgotten Front, written for the Center for American Progress, Caroline Wadhams writes, 6 years after the United States led an invasion of Afghanistan to remove the Taliban from power and destroy al-Qaeda's safe haven, Afghanistan faces a growing insurgency that directly threatens its stability and the national security of the United States and its allies. You can read the full report on the website. Next call is Somerset, England. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Hi. Hi.
Hello. Yes. I'm back to the opium subject again. I apologize. In England, there was a recent suggestion by the Parliament that we should purchase the opium crop and turn it into morphine and therefore use it for medical purposes only. one policy, but it's been rejected outright already.
I heard part of your question. I think that I saw that proposal to buy a lot of to try to basically buy the opium from the farmers and pay them as kind of an emergency measure to start dealing with this problem. You know, I actually think that's a really interesting idea. I guess the one issue is in Afghanistan, there's so much insecurity, and the central government has so little ability to provide security or monitor. So to figure out how to actually, I mean, I'm not sure how you could create a legal market for the opium, because you'd have to create a whole legal framework. I don't think the Afghan government has the capacity to do something like that. I've also heard that the legal opium for morphine and other drugs, that market is very saturated, so that it wouldn't be very lucrative for Afghanistan. But buying some of the crops just for the Afghan government in order to begin to transition them to another crop is an interesting idea, and one I think that's worth exploring a little bit more.
And this chart from your report, except 2001, when the Americans moved into Afghanistan, you can see a fairly steady increase in the cultivation of opium, or poppy that's used for opium, from 1994 through 2007. Elkville, Illinois, you're next. Good morning.
Yes, my question probably correlates to the last two, talking about the poppy crop itself. I read somewhere in an op-ed that someone suggested that poppies could be used as a biodiesel fuel that was even more efficient than the sugar cane Brazilians are using. Have you heard anything about that?
I actually have not heard about that. I mean, it's interesting because people are really trying to figure out how to deal with this, and they're coming up with some really innovative solutions. And you've got to think very innovatively when you're dealing with the fact that Afghanistan is supplying 93% of the world's opium. So I haven't heard that, but it's interesting to think about.
This photograph shows just how rugged and barren the terrain is along the Afghan-Pakistan border. But if you had to guess, and I realize it's just that, where do you think bin Laden is, if he's alive?
It seems that what people think is that he's probably in a certain area of Pakistan called the federally administered tribal areas, which is a semi-autonomous region of Pakistan, which is right on the border, right on the western border of Pakistan. This is a highly, highly isolated region. It both is isolated economically. There's very little of a legal economy. It's also politically isolated from the central government, and it's very rugged terrain. And that's probably where he is, if he's anywhere.
Laguna Woods, California. Good morning.
Good morning. It strikes me that our bipartisan political establishment is busy establishing empire as opposed and subverting the American Republic. Empires, as you know, end up badly, and they're very expensive. And also, there's a high degree of irrationality regarding the logical support of this empire. People rarely answer the question, why is the most powerful military in the history of the world losing to psychopaths like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda? And I read your report regarding the treatment of opium. It strikes me that it also reflects a certain degree of irrationality, that in service to protecting adult boneheads from themselves, we are providing hundreds of millions of dollars to the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and what they want to do with that money, we're giving them the means to buy nuclear bombs.
I think that it's really, I mean, I don't think the Taliban is winning in Afghanistan. I mean, I think that right now the government of Afghanistan and the U.S. with the international community is actually prevailing. But I think the mission is under threat. I mean, I think this mission is crucial, which is why Larry Korb and I wrote this report. We